The silence in our house wasn't empty. It was full. It was a heavy, curated thing, like a sculpture placed in the center of a room that everyone pretends not to see. It took up space on the sofa between us. It sat at the head of the dining table. It was the third entity in our marriage, and for a long time, I treated it with more respect than I treated my own feelings. To anyone looking through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our lives, we were the gold standard. Julian was a partner at a high-stakes corporate law firm, meticulous, brilliant, a man who wore suits that cost more than my first car. I was Elena, the envy of the neighborhood, the mother of two bright, beautiful children, Leo and Maya. We lived in a house that looked like it belonged in an architectural digest. Clean lines, white marble, polished concrete. But that was the problem. You can't relax in a museum. You can't spill wine. You can't laugh too loud. And you certainly can't cry. I was drowning in comfort. It's a strange thing to say, isn't it? People sympathize with tragedy, with poverty, with abuse. But nobody sympathizes with the woman who is everything and feels nothing. That is the trap. If you complain, you are ungrateful. If you scream, you are hysterical. So, you go quiet. Julian wasn't a villain. Not then. He was efficient. He managed our marriage the way he managed a merger. He ensured the mortgage was paid, the cars were detailed, and the college funds were compounding interest. But the man, I had fallen in love with, the one who used to read poetry to me on fire escapes at 2:00 a.m., the one who played the piano with his eyes closed. That man had been evicted. In his place stood a stranger who checked his watch while I was speaking. Our conversations had become transactions. Did you call the landscaper? Yes. Is Leo's math tutor confirmed for Thursday? Yes. I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up. I felt less like a wife and more like an asset manager. I was a crucial part of his portfolio, well-maintained, insured, and displayed when necessary. But inside, beneath the cashmere and the polite smiles, there was a hollow ache in my chest that felt like hunger. I started volunteering at the city library to escape the silence. I needed to be around words, around chaos, around life. That was where I met Gabriel. He wasn't rich. He wasn't polished. He was a writer who taught creative writing workshops in the community room. He wore corduroy jackets that had seen better days and had ink stains on his fingers. But when he looked at me, he didn't see the doctor's wife or the lawyer's wife. He saw Elena. It started innocently enough. Dangerous things always do. We talked about books. He asked me what I was reading, and then he asked me what I thought about what I was reading. It had been years since Julian had asked for my opinion on anything that wasn't a dinner menu. You have a sadness in your eyes, Elena, Gabriel said to me one rainy Tuesday. We were standing by the return cart. It's very loud. That was the moment. The crack in the dam. We moved from books to coffee. From coffee to lunches in parts of the city where I knew Julian's colleagues would never go. Gabriel was the antithesis of my life. He was messy, emotional, and impulsive. He listened to me as if my words were oxygen. He made me feel like I wasn't just a supporting character in Julian's biopic. He made me the protagonist. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself I was just feeding my mind. But the lies began to stack up like old newspapers. I would stay an extra hour after my shift. I invented a book club that met on Thursday nights. Every lie gave me a rush of adrenaline. It was a drug. For the first time in a decade, I had a secret. I had a world that Julian didn't own, didn't control, and didn't know about. In that secret world, I wasn't the mother of Leo and Maya. I wasn't Mrs. Vance. I was just Elena, and Elena was alive. The physical affair was inevitable. It wasn't a cliff I fell off. It was a slow, warm slide into water. A hand brushing mine that lingered too long. A shared look that held too much weight. And finally, an afternoon where lunch turned into a hotel room. I knew, theoretically, that I was destroying everything. But the guilt was a whisper compared to the scream of my need to be wanted. I became an expert at deception. I bought a burner phone and hid it in the lining of my winter boots in the back of the closet. I created a dummy email account. I learned to delete location history, to pay in cash, to check my clothes for scents before walking through my own front door. I was living to lives. In the daylight, I was the perfect mother, driving the SUV, blending organic smoothies, attending PTA meetings. In the shadows, I was a lover, reckless and passionate. And then, things changed at home. It was subtle. Julian, who had been distant for years, suddenly woke up. He started coming home earlier. He started asking questions. Not the accusatory kind that would have been easier. No. He asked kind questions. How was the library today? You look glowing, Elena. Is that a new serum? I feel like we haven't connected lately. Tell me about your day. I was terrified. Had he sensed my happiness? Was my guilt leaking out of my pores? But then, I twisted it in my mind. I thought, maybe this is working. Maybe me being happy, even from a secret source, is fixing the marriage. Maybe I can have both. The arrogance of that thought still haunts me. One evening, I came home late. I had been with Gabriel. My hair was slightly messy, my cheeks flushed. I walked into the living room, and Julian was sitting there, reading a brief, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked up over his reading glasses. His face was a mask of calm. You're late, he said. Softly, traffic, I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. And the book club ran long. We were discussing Tolstoy. Julian nodded slowly. He stood up and walked toward me. He stopped inches from my face. I could smell his cologne, expensive, cold, metallic. Tolstoy, he repeated. He reached out and brushed a stray hair from my forehead. You have a little something. Right here. He tapped his own neck. I froze. I resisted the urge to slap my hand over my neck. What? Is it ink? A shadow, he said, his eyes boring into mine. Just a trick of the light, I suppose. He turned and walked away. Dinner is in 10 minutes. Wash up. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door. I scoured my neck in the mirror. There was nothing there. My skin was pale, unmarked. My hands started to shake. Was he playing with me? Or was I just paranoid? That was the beginning of the psychological siege. Julian became the perfect husband. He started doing the dishes. He planned weekend outings with the kids. He brought me flowers for no reason. It felt like he was studying me. Every time he smiled, I felt like a specimen under a microscope. I felt like the walls were closing in. But I couldn't stop seeing Gabriel. The fear made the affair more intense. It was the only place I could breathe, even as I felt the noose tightening. 6 months into the affair, our 15th wedding anniversary approached. Julian announced he had a surprise. I've booked a week at a private villa on the coast, he said over dinner, pouring us a vintage red. Just the two of us. My mother will take the kids. We need to reconnect. Elena, I know I've been distant. I want to fix it. I felt sick. A week alone with him? No burner phone? No Gabriel? That sounds wonderful. I managed to say. I messaged Gabriel from the bathroom. Going away for a week. Can't talk. I love you. The villa was isolated, perched on a cliff overlooking a gray, churning ocean. It was breathtaking and terrifying. The glass walls meant there was nowhere to hide. The first 3 days were agonizingly normal. We walked on the beach. We cooked together. Julian was charming, funny, attentive. I began to relax. I began to think, he doesn't know. He's just trying. Maybe I can end it with Gabriel when we get back. Maybe I can save this. On the 4th night, a storm rolled in. The wind battered the glass walls. We were sitting by the fire, the only light coming from the flames. You know, Julian said, swirling his brandy. I've been thinking about honesty. I gripped my wine glass. Honesty? Yes. In my line of work, truth is a variable. It's something you shape. But in a marriage, truth should be absolute. Don't you agree? Of course, I whispered. I ran into an old friend of yours the other day. He continued, his voice casual, conversational. At the library, my blood ran cold. Oh, yes, a fascinating man. A writer? Gabriel. What was his last name? Thorne. The sound of Gabriel's name in Julian's mouth was physically painful. It felt like a violation. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. He seems very passionate, Julian said, looking into the fire. He told me he's working on a novel about a woman who lies to lives. He said the tragedy isn't that she gets caught. The tragedy is that she destroys the only things that actually matter. Julian turned to look at me. His eyes were dead. There was no anger, no screaming, just a flat, arctic emptiness. Did you think I wouldn't find out, Elena? Did you think I was stupid? Julian, please, I started to sob. Don't. He cut me off. Sharp, violent in its brevity. Don't insult me with an apology. Not yet. He pulled a tablet from his briefcase. He slid it across the coffee table toward me. Open it. I did. It wasn't just photos. It wasn't just screenshots of texts I thought I had deleted. It was a dossier. He had financial records of every coffee, every hotel room. He had surveillance footage. But the worst part was the emails. There were emails between Gabriel and an account I didn't recognize. Read them, Julian commanded. I read. It was Gabriel writing to someone named Clarissa. Gabriel, she's just a muse, Clarissa. A bored, rich housewife. It's almost too easy. The way she looks at me like I'm her savior. It's pathetic, really. But she pays for the dinners, and the drama helps the writing process. Gabriel, I don't love her. I love the material she gives me. Once the book is done, I'll cut her loose. I stared at the screen. The world tilted on its axis. No, I whispered. This isn't real. You faked this? I didn't fake anything, Julian said calmly. I simply made a fake profile. Clarissa is a literary agent I invented. I reached out to him online, expressed interest in his work, and asked him about his inspiration. Men like Gabriel, they are vain, Elena. They will sell anyone out for a taste of validation. He didn't know he was talking to your husband. He thought he was talking to his future publisher. I felt bile rise in my throat. The romance, the connection, the being seen, it was all a lie. I was a cliché, a bored housewife being mined for content by a mediocre writer. He used you, Julian said, standing up and smoothing his suit jacket. And you let him. You threw our family into the garbage for a man who calls you pathetic to strangers. I fell to my knees. I wept until my throat was raw. I begged Julian to forgive me. I told him I would do anything. He looked down at me, not with pity, but with the calculated assessment of a general who has won the war. Get up, he said. We are going home tomorrow, and we are going to fix this. I thought that was mercy. I thought he was giving me a second chance. I was wrong. When we returned, the house felt different. It was no longer a home. It was a courtroom. Julian laid out the terms. We would go to therapy. We would stay together for the children. But I had to earn back his trust. You will give me all your passwords, he said. Phone, email, social media. You will enable location tracking on your phone 24/7. You will have no access to the joint accounts. I will give you a cash allowance for groceries and household needs. You are on probation, Elena. I agreed. I agreed to everything. I was so consumed by guilt and the humiliation of Gabriel's betrayal that I felt I deserved the punishment. I wanted to atone. For 3 months, I lived like a prisoner. I accounted for every minute of my day. I cooked Julian's favorite meals. I was the perfect mother to Leo and Maya. I smiled at parties while Julian held my waist, his grip tight, possessive. We went to a therapist of his choosing. In those sessions, Julian was magnificent. He was the wounded saint, trying to hold his family together. I was the unstable, weeping sinner. The therapist looked at me with thinly veiled disdain. Julian was writing the narrative, session by session, documenting my instability, my guilt, my erratic behavior. I didn't see the trap until the steel jaws slammed shut. It was a Tuesday morning. The kids were at school. A courier arrived at the door. He handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a petition for divorce, but not just. Divorce. Julian was suing for full legal and physical custody of Leo and Maya. He was petitioning for exclusive use of the marital home. He was offering me zero alimony, citing a fidelity clause in a prenup I barely remembered signing 15 years ago. I stared at the papers. But we're working on it. I whispered to the empty room. He said we were working on it. I drove to his office. I stormed past the receptionist. I burst into his corner office. What is this? I screamed, throwing the papers on his desk. Julian didn't flinch. He was signing a document. He capped his pen, laid it down, and looked at me. This is the end, Elena. You said we were fixing it. You said if I did everything you asked, I lied. He said simply, just like you did. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. You see, Elena, if I had divorced you the moment I found out, it would have been messy. You might have gotten sympathy. You might have gotten shared custody. Courts are soft on mothers. He turned back to me, his face terrifyingly calm. But the last 3 months, the therapy notes where you admit to feeling unstable and depressed, the financial records showing you have no independent income, the emails from your lover calling you pathetic, and most importantly, your agreement to my strict controls. It all paints a picture of a woman who knows she is unfit, a woman who is dangerous to her children's emotional well-being. You can't take my children, I hissed. I am a good mother. Are you? He picked up the file. I have records of you leaving them with a nanny to go to a hotel. I have records of you spending their college fund contributions on expensive dinners for a starving artist. I have a recorded confession from our therapy sessions where you admit you checked out of our family. He leaned in close. I have already been granted an emergency temporary custody order. The locks on the house are being changed as we speak. Your belongings, the ones I deemed yours, have been moved to a storage unit. Here is the key. He slid a small brass key across the mahogany desk. You have nowhere to go, Elena. You have no money. You have no reputation. And now, you have no family. The legal battle was short and brutal. My lawyer told me to settle. He has too much ammunition. She said, if we go to trial, he will humiliate you publicly, and you will still lose. Take the visitation rights he's offering. It's the best we can do. I signed the papers. I moved into a small, beige apartment complex on the edge of town. The silence there is different from the silence in the mansion. It isn't curated. It is hollow. It smells of dust and regret. I see Leo and Maya every other weekend. When they come, they are polite. They are distant. They look at me with confused, hurt eyes. Julian has never bad-mouthed me to them. He is too smart for that. He just plays the role of the super dad. He takes them to Disney. He buys them the best tech. He is the stability they crave. And I am the chaotic weekend visitor who lives in a sad apartment. Last week, I drove past our old house. It was twilight. The lights were on. I could see through the big glass windows. I saw Julian. He was sitting on the sofa, reading. The kids were on the floor, building a Lego set. And then I saw a woman. She walked into the frame. She was younger than me, blonde, elegant. She handed Julian a glass of wine. He smiled at her, a real smile. She sat down next to him, and he put his arm around her. The silence of that house had been filled. I realized then that Julian hadn't just wanted revenge. He wanted an upgrade. He wanted to excise the rot me and rebuild his perfect life without a scratch on the surface. He had won completely. He had the children. He had the house. He had the respect of the community. He was the victim who overcame. I am the villain of the story. I sit in my car, watching them. The engine is cold. The radio is off. I wanted passion. I wanted to be the protagonist. I wanted a plot twist. Be careful what you wish for. I start the car and drive away, back to my empty apartment, where the only thing waiting for me is the echo of my own choices.